Message right here, right now, saying that we are live, and I'm sure the chat will notify us about that in a moment as well.
Fair enough. That's good.
Yep.
How are you doing?
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Armin, and I'm here with Ryan.
Hello.
Ryan is the driver today for this stream. So he will be building things, and I will be reading out the questions, and I will be interacting with you guys in the chat. Now we're trying a new thing here for this stream. We're actually capturing chat from several streaming platforms because we're going out live to Facebook, to YouTube,
Twitter,
to quite a few. Yeah, Twitter
Twitch
as well. Now I'm looking to my watch now, and I see that we still have 3 minutes. So I think we can definitely wait for everyone who should be here to join up.
Yeah, no rush. Armin, help me make this look better. I'm really enjoying my rosy cheek. I'm going to tint it a little more red.
Just a sec. How loud is my keyboard?
Not loud enough.
So what do you want to achieve, Ryan? What is your end goal? What is the game here?
I want to make our cheeks rosier. You see the halftone? I want it to come out red. I think I'm going to have to
maybe
break
should add
this
some
up.
tinting then.
Yeah, but you want the tint to only apply to the halftone. The question is, maybe if I do that and make it really red. There we go. Rosy cheeks. And you've got your polka dot background. Was that shot? Was that photo taken in
Finland?
Finland.
In Finland office. I'm not super happy with the fact that you possess the power of adding post effects to my likeness. That's just a bit scary.
Pretty damn sweet. Sure, go ahead with a pretty noob question. We're not clearly doing anything.
We definitely have a couple of more minutes. Again, I'm going to repeat myself saying that we will give a chance for people who are still catching up or getting a coffee or a beer or whatever they need to get comfortable before we start. So we have a couple of minutes.
No, when you close a project without closing the app, that sounds like a Mac thing, which I'm very familiar with. But no, we don't do that. Maybe that's something worth doing. But at the moment, each application window is a project, so they're linked together.
I feel an urge to say hello in a Tiger King way. Hello there, cool cats and kittens.
Oh god. I've managed to avoid watching Tiger King, but I have watched a lawyer break down everything that's illegal in that show, and it is shocking.
I could easily say you're 1 in a million, Ryan. That makes you exclusive.
This still feels like Tiger King references.
I see that there's quite a few people coming in. We have Victor there. We have Hisemi or Hisemi. I would love a clarification on how do you pronounce this handle or this name, because we do have some questions from both of these persons. Pretty damn sweet. That's a good handle as well.
It's a pretty damn sweet handle.
That's a good handle. Onion Danny. Hello, Onion Danny.
I read that as Onion Daddy, and I was really questionable. You do not want to get on the wrong side of your Onion Daddy.
Okay, I think we're good to go. My clock is ticking 7. In the place that I am at, this is a go time. So hello guys, my name is Armin. I'm a product specialist here at Notch, and I'm here today with Ryan.
Hello, I'm the one on the right.
He's the one on the right and I'm the one on the left. So Ryan will be the driver of this stream. I have a stack of questions that you guys submitted via various socials. And Ryan will be building things, and we will be answering questions that you are interested in. So I'm pretty sure we can start then. Ryan, are you ready? Are we good to go?
Yeah, I'm always ready.
Okay, so the first one comes from Hisemi or Hisemi. Sorry if I mispronounced the handle. How to link an effector to null or any other node to follow the same motion and position?
Yeah, okay. So I'll just make a new layer rather than messing with... What a perfect time to glitch. That's great.
Thank you. Please open the new layers. It's enough of messing about with our likenesses.
So we want to get a null to follow an effector position.
How to link a effector to null or any other node to follow the same motion and position? That is the question.
So I'll just get a basic particle system set up. Let's get a primitive emitter. Boom. We'll get, let's get a...
You might have connected your primitive emitter to a wrong root node.
That's interesting. I shouldn't have done that.
We all make mistakes, Ryan. That's fine. There we go.
That's a terrible mistake. I should be better than that.
So it's all good. It's all good. 1-0. Let's take it as 1-0.
Yeah, let's take it as 1-0. Right. I'll just use this. I'm gonna give this some random motion as well. Take a math modifier. Give it interpolated noise. Just randomly move around this shape 3D without doing anything particularly complicated. Just that. And then on these two, I'll offset the time. And then up the scale a lot. Right, so is that moving in 3D? Well, looks like it's moving in 3D.
I think if you enable the grid, it will be easier to read out the screen.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually. Hey, I see what I'm doing now. How weird is that? So I will add, let's say, a point renderer so we can actually see the particles I'm creating. It should probably just be moving in a single, yeah, they're just moving in one direction. So let's have them attract. I want to get them to attract to this ball that's floating around. Now, depending on how you want to do it, you could just have these apply directly to the velocity effector, but if you've already got them going to a shape 3D and you just want it to follow this object or a null or something else in another system, I always find it's easiest just to connect to the transform modifiers. So now you can see they're all trying to move to this current point. They're moving a bit slowly, so it's like 10. That's a little bit better. You can see they're constantly trying to chase that particular velocity angle.
Another tip or extra tip I would give here is instead of, for instance, using the transform modifier for multitude of effectors that you might be using, you could easily connect all of those effectors to the emitter, in this case primitive emitter, and then use that transform control only on the primitive emitter. Because if something is connected to the primitive emitter, that origin point that then follows with the primitive emitter.
Oh, Armin, I made a mistake. I'm
Did you
using
know?
a very old build.
So we're definitely on a 2-0 then.
Yeah, that's
So now we will
start.
witness how Ryan is restarting his notch, which is fine. That means Ryan is working, so he's testing things with regressions. That's good.
Yes. Always testing, we are. Always testing. Oops, wrong thing. Spoiler alert, we are using OBS. There we go.
Did we finish answering that question though, Ryan?
We kind of did. I think there wasn't too much more to it, is to use an input shape 3D and then you can offset things through
yeah, if you highlight the
transform vector. Right.
If you highlight the input that we were talking about, just on a note, I think that will sum it up.
Yeah, so as has been covered before, if you don't see a property you want to mess with, you can usually double click on a node and you get a much larger list of properties. And in this case, you want the transform modifier input.
And depending on your setup, you might want to use it with the emitter, or you might want to use it with an effector. All depends on how you're building your system or your design.
Correct. Yeah.
So here's another one from CS Byron.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to create a topographic map or contour lines with particle systems and cloners?
This was the one with the
yes.
Vimeo. So
yes, Byron sent us a link to review.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
This was the... My internet dropped just before we started this, so that's why I'm getting network errors. Just mute that. I don't know how loud that is on stream. It's a very nice little project.
Sound here.
Yeah. So it's a very nice little project. You can see really nice depth of field with particles moving around and trails. This isn't quite a contour map. I imagine a contour map as something more like this kind of thing, where you get the edges going around. That's what I'd expect.
Can we touch on both of the things, Ryan? Can we see the contour map as you imagine and the way it was requested? Would you mind that?
Yeah, sure. I'll do this one first because I've got that next to me. Let's how should we do this? Let's start at the basics. Let's get a displaced shape. So I'm gonna get a shape 3D and a let's say some displacement. Go with a displacement map, and this needs to be a plane so that we're actually offsetting off of a surface rather than a sphere. Give it a bunch of subdivisions so we've got some good resolution to it. Then I'll add a skylight to light this thing. You don't need to do anything fancy just yet, we're just getting an idea of what things will look like. And then I'm just going to add some fractal noise. I'm going to use this as the source for my displacement. It's a bit subtle at the moment, so I'll up the gain a little bit so we get a little more offset, and then up the displacement amount, something like that. One thing I really enjoy is just cycling through all the different kinds of displacement we have now.
Oh yeah, it's worthy to mention that we added quite a lot more of different displacements to this node. So if you hadn't had a chance to check it out, I would strongly encourage you guys to cycle through and find something that you fancy, that you like.
I always end up looking at this flow displacement. It's like Armin has an addiction to data moshing. I have an addiction to this flow kind of animation. There we go. I think it's fine. I don't need to do anything fancy. So how are the different ways we could displace this or get a topographic map from this? So one way I would do it is to use a slice deformer. So this node, what it does is it takes a mesh and slices it up geometrically. And at the moment it's quite thick, but if I increase the slices, we get a lot more, we get quite a nice topographic map there. Actually add a region camera on the top so that we can look at it from above. There we go, have it positioned on Y. There we go. So there's a pretty basic topographic map. Another way I would do it, because the slice deformer, if you've got a really complex and high geometry mesh or a displacement with a lot more details than in here, then you can just use mapping with a tile node. So in this case, I'm going to leave this as is, move that to the side. Actually, I'll just copy paste. We'll hide this for now, go to the root and get rid of that. So in this case, rather than physically cutting the mesh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the material on the mesh and then map this tiles texture along it so that you get these stripes appearing. First thing we're going to do, tiles always starts in a 256 with just random noise. In this case, on a chessboard, I want harsh lines between them. I don't want any lines along the x-axis. So that'll cover that. Then I want a mapping node.
Ryan, not to kill your flow, can I ask you for a favor? I would like to see a little bit more of your properties. Is there a reason why we have a resource panel on? I don't think we're using any resources for this now. Would you mind?
Not yet, but we will use resources in time, I'm sure.
Thank you. That's great. That's great. Appreciate it.
Okay, so there's the mapping node, and then we'll apply this texture, and we're getting a striping effect. Let's add a few more stripes. And the reason we're getting this blending is because this texture is only a 256 by 256 texture, so it's actually quite low res. So I'm gonna fix that. Actually, I'm gonna fix this the better way. Rather than just adding a bunch of stripes, I'm just gonna scale this down. So now our mapping node is smaller and we're not using a massive texture just to do stripes, we're just scaling it down. There we go, that's a lot nicer. And if we want to increase the gap width, I can just either increase this or that's fine as is. I think it's fine as is.
I think it's starting to look really slick. You know what's the hot question here? How would it look with Rachette?
With Rachette.
I'm joking.
Well, we're not doing topographic maps, Armin, if we're doing Touchette.
Fair enough. Carry on.
But, okay, so that works. And then if we want the same thing, so if we noticed when we use this, we were getting stripes and we could see the stripes through, what I can do is enable double-sided, and so now we can see the mesh on the inside as well.
Yeah, Ryan just changed the cull mode, so basically default is front, but you can always have it double-sided, and that definitely helps in these kind of cases.
And then I shall, when I find it, change the blend mode. There we go. Change the blend mode to alpha to coverage. So what this does is rather than using the rather than just having the whole mesh appear solid, it blends the it checks for the alpha channel, and where the alpha channel was below a certain threshold, I think it's like 0.5, it cuts off the mesh and it just leaves it visible. So, and this can work in a ton of different areas, but we can see the edges at the moment are darkening, and that's because of this blend mode here. So we set that to multi-blend, and now it's straight, now it's harsh.
So I'm gonna be that mean guy who is rushing you. So I presume the next step here would be to add something like particle system and to use this shape 3D as a mesh emitter. Is that correct?
For what?
Well, if we were to do something similar to that video.
Ah, that's a different effect. Yeah. Okay. So that was to remind ourselves of what we're talking about. That was this.
While Ryan is finding the link, I will remind Ryan that he is to save this file and make it available for download later.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Ryan.
Loud again. So yeah. So as I said when I first saw this, this looks like it's particle trails which are just being moved around and then some depth of field being applied to it. So it's not too hard to recreate. Let's just add a new layer here. And I'll start once again, particle root, parent to the root. Primitive emitter, parent to the root. Finally, curl
Ryan
noise.
is using Control-R shortcut to connect everything to the root. So Control-R is actually a smart shortcut. You would connect to the related closest root. So basically, if it's particle emitter or particle effector, you will always go for particle root.
There we go. Yeah, and yeah, Armin's correct. I will use that constantly because it is just the most useful thing you can do. I use it to the point that I forget I can't use it in some circumstances and get confused when nothing is working.
It is a handy shortcut for sure. We're actually expanding our shortcut list ever so often, I guess, as much as we can, basically.
We're running out of letters at this point. I'm just, rather than spend time playing around with the curl noise, everyone has presets, and one of these is long static curls. So I'll just apply that, and now we get this kind of effect. This is a little bit off of the effect I wanted, so I'm going to just increase the noise size a little bit, so we're still seeing it. Nah, keep it static. Yeah, that'll work. Next, I need some trails. Ooh. So at the moment, the particles are just being rendered and moving. We need some actual lines to appear to sort of copy it. Now we're getting something a little more similar. The trails in that one were longer, and there are much fewer of them though. So let's take the particle use amount all the way down and kick that up. This is going to dig into that old tutorial I did relatively recently about how you get super long particle trails. One of the most important things is to cap your frame rate. I'm just going to cap it at 60. There we go. Already got some longer particle trails.
I would say that probably it's smart to lock particles in all the simulations, generally in particles or fields. Anything that is related to generative like that, it should be locked off to a specific frame rate that you desire, because if you keep it open and then you render to a video, for instance, the results might vary very much from what you have on the viewport and what you have in the video. So always lock it to a desired frame rate.
Yeah, locking off your frame rate is always helpful, because you just are able to like wean out some problems a lot earlier than they actually come in. Let's add a color ramp and just change these colors a little bit, because white is quite garish. Now, Armin, you know that my weakness is color, so you're going to have to tell me when it looks good.
I'll do my best.
Isn't yet. Let's see.
You know what? There's a magical combo: cyan and magenta.
Cyan and magenta.
Yes, it always works.
Cyan and I'm bad at color, Armin.
So light, think of light blue and light purple, I'd say, something like that. Yeah, you're kind of there. Just there we go. Yeah, why not?
We'll go with that.
Let's go with that.
Save us time.
I'll
sort
take the
these
wrath of
particles
the community for the color choices.
You're a brave soul. Let's see. Yeah, that looks better.
I think this is more or less there. Obviously, this could be pushed quite a lot further because the original video is much slicker. But I think this proves the concept, doesn't it? It proves
if you wanted to like get the depth field in, you'd be adding geometry and then depth of field, and you got to use cameras and stuff. So I don't know. It's up to you, Armin. Do you want to force people to watch me?
I think we should go a little bit further, as there's a vast list, and I'm sure that there's some people here with us live of the people who actually send in questions. So I think we can go a little bit further. I think that Byron would agree that this gives him a good handle on where to start.
Sure. All right. Where are we going? Oops. Back to that.
Okay, so are you ready? Or actually, I'm going to give you a little bit of space and I'm going to answer this question myself.
Sure.
How can I do advanced output in Notch? For example, splitting the output into different segments like in Resolume. Well, to be honest, we generally advise people to use media servers or external tools for such things. Resolume being one of them, because Notch is essentially a motion graphics creation tool, so we don't do live shows with it. So I would strongly recommend considering some kind of a tool to output it. I would say perhaps if the system that you are thinking of is not supporting Notch directly, you can always export your setting to a standalone, and via NDI, Spout, or Magwell, or any other Media Foundation enabled capture card, send it to that system of your preference. Generally, though, when it comes to splitting the output, I would say you can treat your viewport as a overall space and place, let's say, 4 image 2Ds. So one at the top left, then top right corner. So basically, you just split it up into 4 segments, and then you can feed in different videos or different setups towards all of those 4 outputs. And I think maybe we will mention that, but the best way then to build your scene, so it will be outputted specifically for that image 2D, would be to render things to render the texture. And if there's not going to be many questions towards the end of the stream, we could easily talk a little bit about render to texture, because this is a powerful and nice node to be aware of.
Yeah,
what
sure.
Do you think?
Render to texture, I think it actually will come up in a bit.
Yeah, it's likely that somebody actually asked about it, and we will just cover that as we progress. So a little heads up, there are some questions that are similar in nature. So we took upon ourselves to sort of merge several of them, if that makes sense. And we're going to try to address them as best as we can. Reminder, we're streaming to several platforms. So it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, I think, and Twitch. So if you are sending in questions, they are popping up to a unified chat, just so you know. Okay. The next one from Marcus is actually the whole list, so I'm going to start with the first one. How do you follow... Get ready. How do you follow objects on spline?
Okay. Does he say what like how, whether it's an object following a spline or the camera following a spline? Is it sort of left open?
Could you repeat?
I was saying, does he give any more information about like having objects follow a spline?
No, I think this is quite an open question, so I'll leave it up to you to interpret or show a couple of suggestions, because I'm sure that it's going to be quite handy for quite a few users. Splines is an interesting subject. It's always good to have an extra bit of information about splines.
All right, okay. I will interpret it as I wish. We'll just pull this around and let's make it loop so that we can mess with it a little bit. So if we want to have an object follow a spline, then that's as easy as getting a spline follower. So this node, what it'll do is it'll take a spline that you've created and it will just mark a point on that spline, and depending on the spline time value here, it will move that point along the spline. So if I take a shape through D, move that here. If I got lighting enabled, what am I doing? Is it just very large? Oh, I'm using a spline, not a shape. There we go. There's our shape, and then as we move along here, this will follow the spline. Just make it a bit smaller. Then if I set this to be a box, let's make it smaller again. Then yeah, again, we can just move around here, it will follow along. In fact, I can even use a continuous modifier to make it do it for me, so I don't get RSI from driving this spline time. There we go. Now at the moment it won't follow rotation, but you can just enable that easily.
Can I challenge you, Ryan? Can you set a camera on the spline? Would that be an option?
A camera on the spline, or a camera following the object on the spline?
On the spline, on the very spline.
Okay,
let's say,
so
yep.
I'll do both. It's easy enough to do both. If I
Fair enough.
do this, I set this to camera options, set to current view. It moves the camera from wherever you put it in the scene. It just snaps it to the view. You can see that now switching between my orbit camera. I'm always going back to that original position I was at. And the camera has a target node input. Once I connect that in, we can see the camera is now following that object wherever it goes. So that's easy enough. But if as for Armin's request, a camera is just a node like anything else, so you can just stick a camera, on a shape 3D, and now that camera is following along. As I said before, it's not going to rotate and follow direction unless you tell it to. Now it's going to follow around the spline.
I think I would mention one more extra sweet little property, which is look ahead time. I've really enjoyed that little property in Spline Follower.
Yeah, sure. That just sets how far ahead, as a percentage of the spline or something like that, the camera is going to look. So now it doesn't quite glitch out as much because it's looking ahead of itself. If I was to hide that, you can see that when it starts going into a curve, it starts rotating ahead of the actual position of the camera.
And I would probably mention, if you haven't done that yet, that if you grab a null now and alter its handles via scaling, you actually alter the width or the Bezier curve of the actual pivot. Does that make sense?
Oh, do you mean of the spline, like that?
Yeah, exactly. So you can alter the spline as you please with all these pivots, and you can rotate it. And since it's a generative here notch, you can actually set some modifiers, and that spline, those nulls can actually be moving in 3D space. So basically it becomes a living, breathing creature.
It's a living, breathing creature? That one's got me confused. Anyway, so yeah,
Sorry.
you could do stuff like that. We could then, as Armin said, we could pull this onto its rotation, and you can see that as I increase the scale, it now is moving the spline. If I had this shape going along it, I should reset that scale before it goes at warp speed. You can see that this shape is following the spline even when the spline is being animated. Really easy. What was it? Was there another part to that, or have we covered it? Was there another way of interpreting that
No,
question?
I think we went far and wide with this one. We can easily move on. So the next one here: is there a signal smoothing option in? Is there a signal smoothing option for Connect Azure node?
Okay, let me make a new layer for that. So for smoothing the signal smoothing, so if you're talking about the actual raw images coming in, then you're going to be looking at just normal ways that you try and reduce noise in an image. So edge-aware blur is a way of reducing noise in an image. Was that what you was asking, Armin?
Well, it's not specific, so maybe we can mention both.
So like the Connect skeleton as well. So with Connect skeletons, you can get there's a smoothing option. So that's what I would use for smoothing a skeleton movement from a Connect at least. The Connect data that comes in can be a bit noisy, so we don't generally recommend it as a mocap option. But if you want to use it, then yeah, it's worth trying out.
Yeah, it's definitely not perfect. It's not necessarily created for a show use. Let's say where you expect 100% slick motion. For that, I would always recommend motion capture suit, and we support several.
It's probably good enough for like. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just to give a shout to our friends at Norton. They have a great suit for a great price, and they are very nice people. So if you're interested in motion capture suits, please check out Perception Neuron, and I'm sure you're gonna get a nice demo about that.
Yeah, the Neuron suit is very good. I've stolen one for the office and taken it home. It's so fun.
Just so you're aware, this is going out live and it's recorded, right?
Uh-oh.
Just so you're aware.
I have not borrowed one from the office that I will give back.
Right, so we have another question from Marcus, and it's: can you demo hot zones using Connect Azure?
Well, I don't have a Connect Azure, so I can't demo it with a Connect Azure. I don't have a Connect camera at all, actually. But let's just use some pre-recorded data.
Yes, having access to this kind of equipment is a little bit complex now, as we all are in a situation where majority of us are working or studying from home. So we're gonna make our best to improvise and show that with, as Ryan says, pre-recorded data. So go on.
So I'm gonna have to go through my piles and piles of source projects. There we go. I knew I was gonna need that. That resources panel I'm in. You've made it so small.
All I hear today is excuses and complaints, Ryan. What's going on?
Well, you're at fault. Is it that one I wanted to use? I'll just use it for now. I'm not in a rush. Okay, so if I go to here, let's say I want to use it with Connect data. For now, I'll just use Perception Neuron suit and and some pre-recorded BVH data, and just wait for that to come in.
Usually, yeah, it takes a moment to load up depending on the size of the file.
Yeah, these are pretty large. This is a pretty large BVH. I should really cut it out, but when I'm just testing things, I generally don't mind waiting 5 minutes. Usually gives me time for a water break. I should have been more patient. It was fine.
No, it's gonna come back.
Yeah.
It's just taking time to load up. So while Ryan is doing that, and in an unlikely event of crashing, we do have tools for that. So should Ryan not be able to recover this file now or crash, he will be able to open Notch and go for the file. There's autosave recovery property. So autosave works every 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And the iteration of autosaves can be changed by file preferences. You have a whole tab there to set the specifics of how often should the autosave work.
There we go.
We don't have to use that. So that's very nice.
My ability to break things will never cease to amaze myself.
Is somebody shaving beard next to you, Ryan? Something was really loud there in the background.
I think there's a lawnmower outside.
Oh, the joys of working from home. So I'm sure we will be excused for that. Let's just carry on.
So this is basically the same setup you'd have with a Connect node. So you can imagine... Oh, I can hear it through my headphones. That is really irritating. So this is basically the same setup you'd have with a Connect node. It's just I can't test Connect at the moment, so we'll just assume that this is the same for now. It was a question we wanted to have something track along with the body parts.
Sorry?
What was the question? We wanted to track something with the body parts?
So we would like a demo on the hot zone. So if you can set up
the
a little demo. Exactly.
Right, okay. So what I'll do is I will... In fact, I'll hide this mesh for now. And I'll just take the head and I'll take the left hand. Where's the left hand? There's the left hand. And the right hand. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the skeleton mesh that this is just something I got from Mixamo. Just taking that skeleton mesh, opening it up, and then taking the individual bones and parenting objects to those bones. So if I go here, one of these shapes is going to be your left hand, one of these shapes is going to be your head, and one of these shapes is going to be your right hand. In fact, I will color code them. I always think of my left hand as blue. So let's make our left hand blue and our right hand, where is it? Red. There we go. It's a bit small now. Let's bring that back up. There we go. So let's see. I want to set it up so that when this red ball is within the left side or the right side of this viewport, I want to make it so that it enables something. So I'm going to add a hot zone node, and I'm going to use these as test points. So the red one was this one. I'm going to add this as a test point. Now, whenever this red marker moves within this square, it's going to output a value. We can see here what value that is. And because I want that this box to be on the right, I'm going to add my own bounding box here. I'm just going to move this to the side and then scale it up. So whenever this enters this box, we're going to get a value here. So any zone hit, 1, that means any of the zones that you can add here have been hit. And current zone 1, well, there's only one zone, so that's the one being hit. Then we're going to use an extractor. The extractor is going to take a value from this hot zone. So it can extract values from other nodes, and in this case we've got these two that we want to extract from. In this case I'm just going to say current zone hit, and then let's make this guy visible only when his left arm is in that space. So now every time he takes his arm outside of that space, when it's over here, it's off, but when his arm goes back, which I think he isn't going to do for me, so I'll just move this closer to him, it's going to be on.
So to recap this, basically you need a bounding box which defines the hit area, and you need some kind of a object that actually has to enter that area, and then with an extractor you just define what should it do, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. So from here we've
Fair
got
enough.
And the mesh will only appear now once this object, the object that we are tracking in the test points, moves into the bounding box, the region that we are testing within. This is a super easy setup as well, although it does get a bit messy.
So I think we are ready to move on. I think you captured the essence of the setup. Obviously, there's more to say about that. And if you are truly interested, we did cover quite a bit of this in our previous stream, which was all about modifiers. So if you're interested, do come back to the Notch channel on YouTube and search for getting to know your deformers, getting to know your modifiers, sorry. That is the stream you're looking for. That is where you will have more information about this specific setup and more. So with that said, I think we're ready to move on. The fourth question here from Marcus is clot on objects. Marcus, I think we need a little bit more information here. So I think just because we have, well, we already are on a quite good roll here. We're here for half hour. We're going to have to move on because it could be interpreted really widely and it could take a lot of time. So better yet, we just hammer out a couple of more questions that are more direct and more specific. So the next one in Marcus's list is how to crop a full scene like a bounding box does, like procedural mesh type. Couldn't solve it in my Notchmeister project. This is a wide one too. Ryan, do you have some input here? I don't think we're going to be building much here, but maybe you have a tip here.
Yeah, I think maybe the confusion comes in from what the bounding box actually does. The bounding box isn't like a limiter on things in your scene. It is a limiter for things that require limiting. So like a voxel cone lighting node, the way that node works requires a region to be calculated. So that node, it doesn't necessarily require a bounding box because it will use a default one, as you can see, even before it's hooked up. It's got like a default area it's going to calculate. But adding a bounding box gives it a controllable region that it will actually apply in. So in terms of how you could limit certain things, it might be if I just go get a new mesh, because I am not quick at collecting things from my file directory. Here we go. Oop. Come on, but there we go. Just wait for this guy to load in. In hindsight, it's a pretty large mesh, but I am a patient man. Have there been any good questions in the?
Yes, indeed. I actually took one or two to the list, so we're gonna definitely cover them.
Okay,
as soon as we hit 1 hour 15 mark, we're gonna jump in for the live questions. So we actually give a little bit of love and attention to people who actually tuned in and watching this live.
Okay,
again,
sure.
We got a ton of questions, and I think it's gonna be hard to actually cover them all. Although we did prepare answers for all of them, but we'll just have to do our best for the time that we have, and we plan to disturb you and hold you here for 1.5 hours. So if you need a coffee, if you need a tea or a beer, it's a good time to pop one up.
So here's just a mesh I've got from Maguire CGA. I think it's like one of those standard testing meshes that everyone uses. It's a super high resolution, and this node is basically cutting into it. This is only usable for meshes, this node, the cold deformer. But it's super useful when something is coming up somewhere and you just don't want it. You don't want it in your scene. You need to get rid of it. You can just cut off different parts of a mesh so they don't appear. I'm just going to set this to double-sided so that we can see the inside of the mesh. There you go. So, for example, if this was within your Notchmeister project and you only wanted to see it within this region, then we could set this to be a box. There we go. Invert it so it's only culling things on the inside, and then just scale it down so it fits within this region. And now we're just getting a slice of this man's belly. Really easy, and you can stack these up as well, so you could have another one.
I'll be naughty, Ryan, and I'll stop you here, and I will mention that we do have a whole stream about deformers. So if that's something of an interest, I would definitely recommend checking that out. And are we good to go for another question, Ryan? Do you feel
sure.
like you answered the question?
Yeah. I mean, the general thing is that a bounding box
broad.
is something which only certain nodes use. So you need to. It's not like a thing you can always apply everywhere. It depends on a node-to-node basis. Specifically, you said with your Notchmeister project, it would depend what you were using in that Notchmeister project for what you would use to keep things out of certain areas.
So let's move on to the next one. I actually like the next question. It's quite nice. How to build a composition of 2-3 layers in one render. So basically how to work with a notch like with Premiere. I think this warrants a stream of its own, like 2D workflows and layer layer workflows. But I think
we should definitely do that. We should definitely do that. So basically you're looking at it right now. This is the layer viewer. You're probably mostly using this in the layers as separate effects mode, which means that each layer is treated as a separate effect. But if we go to the project settings here, we can turn this off. And what this means is that now every layer with an S selected is running at the same time. So this layer is empty. If I go here, you see these layers, they are actually running at the same time. The reason we don't see both of them at the same time is because this layer is set to solid. So I set this layer to blend with alpha channel. We should now see that it's blending on top of the layer below. Although I think actually the glow is killing it. There we go, you can kind of see it in the background. Maybe get rid of the grid as well. What was this? Getting confused with my layers now. Ah, right, that's what it was. Yeah, I think the glow is sort of blowing around. Yeah, the glow is killing it. So I'd
Let's
have to...
not glow things then.
Yeah, just kill the glow. And the depth of field, it's the depth of field. Depth of field doesn't work with alpha yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions that popped up, so I'm just gonna go ahead and chime in here saying yet. This is definitely something that is being looked into, so we will be back with news about this in the future releases. Yet. Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up.
Hopefully. But yeah, you can see you can have two layers here blending on top of each other. If I was to lower the timeline of this one, whoops, move this one over here, we can blend from one to another. So within this range, I can go to here. I can set, oh no, this one actually. Is that way? Yes. I want to key the alpha of this.
I think maybe it's worthy to mention, I don't know if Ryan is big in Adobe, but Adobe reads layers the opposite direction. So you would stack from bottom to the top. And in our case, it's from the top towards the bottom. So it's just the opposite direction, just so you know.
Yeah, so you can see the alpha of this thing is blending in. You probably want to key both. That's a very basic transition you would do. Yeah, it depends on like how much else you're trying to think of in terms of actually treating this as a timeline. When I say as a timeline, it is a timeline, sorry.
Yeah, it's just not necessarily the first thing that people catch up on when they're using Notch. But if you want to do adjustment layers or something like that, that's obviously as well available too.
Yeah, so if you add a layer, we'll just make this blank. We can set a layer to make sure that it's visible. What was it? It was a composition layer. So if I add a what is your favorite post effect, Armin?
Oh god, motion data mosh. Vector blur.
Vector blur. Vector blur. I like vector blur more.
I
must admit, I like vector blur more. So now you can see
that we align on something.
Now you can see this layer is applying to all the other layers combined. So if I sit right in the middle here, let it play for a bit, you can see this vector blur is being applied to both this layer and this layer. It's just being applied on top like that.
Cool.
Really
Ryan?
Simple.
I'm gonna rush you now, and Marcus. I think we're gonna have to skip out several of your questions because we are literally running quite out of time to cover everything. So I think it's only fair if we answer some other questions from other guys. But before we move on, let's jump in on your last one. Camera techniques for building scene, jumping from cam to cam. Maybe we can talk about jumping from cam to cam. And
Okay.
Marcus is specifying that he's not interested in select child workflow as he is already aware of it. Is there alternatives?
Okay. Select child is generally like the easy way of doing it. It allows you to quite easily set up different camera points and then just swap them. I know for sure that I will very happily just use a select child when I need to. If you want hard cuts from different cameras, then you can always use the camera's priority attribute here. So I'm just going to set this camera position to my current view, then copy paste, whip around here, set this camera position to my current view, and then one more time, copy paste, set this camera position to my current view. I can't remember if I changed it or not. I didn't. Yep, there we go. Right, so now as I go between my scene cameras, we can see we're getting different views on this camera, on this object. But while we're in rendering view, we can also change the priority. So as long as this priority is a number higher than any of these other cameras, then it doesn't matter where I put it in the viewport or in the node graph even, it will always render on top. Whereas if I change the priority, you can see that when I put it higher, it'll get picked up.
So what if I actually want smoother transitions?
Oh, so you want to blend between positions? Sure. So that,
Yeah.
the easiest way to do that is with a tweening null. So what this node will do, so what I'm going to do is going to deselect these cameras from the root. I'm just going to connect them to the input here. So now the transforms of these cameras have been brought into this tweening null. And then when I add a new camera, it is going to animate between these positions. So if I tell it to start, well, maybe you do need to, oh no, it's got that. Just get the adaptation rate a little bit higher. Set 2, do we play through?
I would probably suggest
right, I'm not actually looking at it.
I think for the clarity, I would change those cameras to nulls because you can right click and go for replace node with.
Sure. Here's a test. I wonder if that happens if I do that to all three of them.
Ryan chooses the best time to test out things. Thank you, Ryan.
This is how we learn. It just does it one at a time. That's fine. That's probably for the better. I would personally just use cameras because then it's more clear to me what I'm doing. But if Armin requests the nulls, he gets the nulls.
I shall be granted a null. Thank you very much.
So yeah, you can see here, it will smoothly move between camera positions. There is also the option of having like a spline and then animating along that spline and just having some modifiers that are set up to stop a modifier system to set up and stop along that spline depending on where you want to.
We kind of spoke about spline and camera, so I think we're pretty good there for at least for today.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to give you a breathing moment right there, and I'm going to answer the next question. How can I create buttons in Web UI? Well, to be honest, this is a wide question as well. And this is a question from Vanilla Lab. So you can't necessarily create buttons. You can expose properties. So all the properties, or 95% of the properties in Notch, is exposable for media server use or Web GUI use. So if you press on a node and you see a question mark on the left-hand side, just press on that. And as soon as you expose that property is available for you in a Web GUI if you enabled Web GUI. I think Ryan will demo this actually. Why? It's a cool thing to demo.
Demo the position.
Before you jump into demoing, I'm gonna mention that what we expose, it's a slider. So basically, you have a refined control over a property that by default is set to 0 from 0 to null. So you can always extend that range. The very button per se, like an on-off tick box, is not available in the Web GUI at the moment. but I can put my hand on the heart saying that Web GUI is definitely getting a face uplift at some point in the future. So there will be
Ooh,
more
sneaky.
interesting options there. I am big advocate, and I'm a big fan of Web GUI, so I'm super excited and keen to see what's gonna come out there. But let's see what we have now. Let's see what we can do exactly this moment.
This is a very leaky stream, Armin.
I have to agree. That's true. We're such a blabbers.
Sorry, just to come back a bit. The phrasing of the question made it sound like this is a guy who knows a bit about programming and he'd want to do some of this, the Web GUI stuff on his own. I would suggest he looks at one of the manual pages. If I just a quick Googling, I've gotten to this Web GUI page, so you can see here. Gives you a bit of an understanding of how you could write your own API for the Web GUI and create your own custom web page if that was something you wanted to do. It's a very easy little setup. You can see most of the code is there for you already. So yeah, that would be an option for you if you really wanted to go pretty hardcore with that. And as Joshua Davis says, just use OSC. Because I would use OSC.
I would then ask you to expose a property if you don't mind. Would you?
Sure. Let's figure it. Let's open that rabbit hole. Expose property. Enable Web GUI. This port is the port that you're
Ryan,
going to use.
Let's be consistent. Where did you press? You went for the project settings, I presume, and that's exactly where you got this panel, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So go here. Go to local host 8910. That's lucky that I've done this 100 times. And you can see from here, I can now update this shape position just within this tab. I didn't set a min and max value, so it's just going between 0 and 1 on default. I can also switch layers, but that will only work, as it says, when running in standalone.
So the next question actually ties into this one from Leghieri. Is there a way to switch cameras and layers with not using standalone or Web GUI?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
There you go. You can do it like that, or you could, if you were using this setup, you could expose this property. And
I would just like to add that swapping layers in Web GUI, it's available only in standalone. You will not be able to swap layers in the builder mode. When you're working in a builder, you will not swap layers. You have to export the executable to swap the layers.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that already. But yeah, you can see here we're swapping between two cameras already. And all I need to do that, so if I unexpose it, you can see that this property is still here. You just need to reload the page and it will come back. Super quick.
Fair enough. Okay, let's move on to another question. This one is, or actually, there's actually three of them. This is from Haitam. How do you link the position of a particle effector to Mixamo character's hand or head position?
A particle effector?
Yeah.
Let's just use this one and build from here. So I would. Well, it's basically the same thing, isn't it? So I'll take a particle root. Okay, out. It's kind of a combination of some of the things we covered earlier before I realized I was using an extraordinarily old build. We'll get a primitive emitter so that we can actually have some particles to affect. A velocity effector. Pull that in, and I'll set this to attract again, just because it's very easy to see where it's going from an attracted position. So if I wanted to control that node, and I wanted to control that node's position, I would just do that by taking this property of the red shape 3D and just going into the transform modifiers input, just like that. Now you can see again, it's following that position. It's a bit slow, so I'll just set that to 9, I guess. Well, now it's a bit fast. 6 maybe is a good balance. You can see now wherever this is going. The little glitchiness is just because when velocities go right into the middle, they can get flung either side, so you need to add some dampening on it. But otherwise, that's pretty much what you're looking for.
Okay, so with that said then, next question, is there a way to generate a displacement map using 3D object?
Yes, there is. And actually, I'm not going to use this. I am going to use one I prepared earlier for this one question. And I've managed to lose my folder window. Let's go for this one. I don't remember if it was this one or a different one. Let's find out. We might be jumping. We might be answering a different question slightly earlier. We'll see what things I've lined up for myself.
So, to be honest, while Ryan is loading this one up, and it might take a moment, I see that there's a question that I can answer while this is happening. What operations are available for the expression modifier besides the ones mentioned in the manual? Victor is asking that. Well, Victor, whatever is mentioned in the manual is what is supported. So you can add, subtract, multiply, and more. I would hold an eye on the manual, and I would hold an eye on the upcoming releases. There might be some changes to that node. I'm again talking about things that are to come. I'll just stop now.
I think I'll put it in a different one. So I'll just wait for this one to load. Have you got another question you can cover?
Absolutely. I see that there's one asking, do you have any special COVID-19 related offers? That's from Ho Yep. Yes, indeed, we do. We have a discounted bundle version of £59 where you get a dongle and you get a learning's license. It's just is being sent with the untracked mail, so hence it is probably going to take a while to arrive to your door because, well, to be honest, mailing services these days are a little bit overstacked and a little bit undermanned, so just be aware of that. But if you do have a code meter, if you're a Disguise, Hippo, or any other media server or any other software vendor user that actually uses code meter and you have your own, you could easily hop in for a Notch.1 COVID-19 free PLE license and just grab that. Ryan, do you have a link there? Could you please pop that window on the screen? I will
sure.
probably put a link in the chat.
So this is the link that Armin's talking about. This is our page for getting a free license. And this is just to help those who, to help everyone really in this really awful time.
We are all perhaps not doing what we should be doing, and we're stuck at home. So let's just get the best out of the time while we're at home. Let's study together, and let's learn some new things. So just go ahead and grab that learner's license. Again, if you want to grab learner's license, you need a dongle. If you don't have a dongle, you have to order one with us. So I'm not going to go further than that. You can find all the information in Notch.1. If you have any specific questions, shoot a question in the chat. If you're watching us live, I'm happy to type away an answer while Ryan is explaining the question that we had previously. And I'm going to repeat it now, I think. Is there a way to generate a displacement map using a 3D model?
Yeah, so here's a very basic setup for that. So I'm just going to hide some things so we can look at things one thing at a time. So there we go. Actually, it's probably easier if I just do that and then review these. So as we can see here, we've got a dragon, a very large looking dragon, and I'm going to use that to displace this plane. Now if I want to use that to displace this plane, I need to figure out how I can tell a displacement deformer to displace it from a perspective. So what I've got is a render to texture node. What this node does is it takes all the nodes below it and it will render them as a texture. So if I just enable this node again, you can see this is the view of this node from above, right? So when, oops, I just disabled something. No, that's fine. So from above, this region node is rendering this frame, and then this is being output as a texture. If I just hide this mesh right now, you can see that this is what's coming up on the surface, and this is because it's just using the luminance of this image. So what I need it to do is use the G buffer. Now the G buffer is the depth of an image with respect to the camera. So in this case, I've set the depth buffer to camera space, normalized. Normalized means that it's going to be set so to values between 0 and 1. Invert, because by default the furthest distance away is very bright and the closest distance very dark. In this case, I want the furthest away to be very dark. I want that to be the area when we've got very little displacement, and the brightest areas to be the areas with the most displacement. So I just invert that. And then finally, I've added some color correction. What this is doing is it's changing the bright areas so that some are, it's changing the sort of range that we're looking at so that the brightest areas are much closer than they actually are in the image. And then once we do that, we get this displacement. But this is where you obviously can see the hole in this trick. It's just displacing a mesh. So you can see all of these hard edges coming up, and you're going to lose some information like at the back of the head. And while you can try and smooth it out a bit, you're going to lose detail in other parts of the mesh. So it's one of those sort of back and forth kind of things that you can try, but it depends on the setup you have. Another option would be to use procedurals.
Actually, that ties into the next question right there, because Hightam is asking, is procedural meshing the best way to extrude a 3D mesh using another mesh or procedural primitive? So I think he's just looking for best solution. So you showed one workflow. I think that would be that other workflow for him.
Yeah, so in this case, I would probably I quite like the blending, so you could probably do that if you really wanted to get something fun and funky going in with the smoothed union. But it's like, it depends on how much you can expense on this. So like this version is running at it's actually probably much faster than the 60. So if I just reset the frame cap, this one is running at maybe 100, and most of that is probably this skylight, whereas in this one we're running about 80, 85, 60. So it's that you're going to lose some performance when you use procedurals, just because they're a much more expensive system.
Fair enough. I think that covers it. Okay. Question from Legeri or Legeri. I am sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Hello. Is it possible to load point cloud data coming in from a LiDAR sensor?
Yes, you can. So if you want to do that live, you would want to use a just close that. I'll include this in that file once I put it out there. For point level animation, so in terms of already exported data that you have, you can take that data and it will come into Notch as I believe as an FBX, and just it won't generate a mesh, but the points will be there. So you just need to use a mesh emitter to emit particles on those points so that you can actually see them. If you're using offline, if you're using live data, so you want to have like a LiDAR scanner sending live data into Notch, then you'll want to be looking at the sorry, I've been speaking so much that I'm running out of air.
So finish the sentence and I'm going to talk a bit then.
Thank you. So for live data, you'd want to look at the geometry sender and receiver nodes. Those nodes are currently in beta, and they do require some C++ programming knowledge. And most of that is going to be on you guys to sort of figure out, because as I said, it's in beta, and there isn't really a standard for sending geometry over networks. So we're still working out how to use that node. But if you want to try it out, do get in touch and give it a shot.
So while Ryan was building this answer to the question, I dig through our own website and I just want to clarify the COVID-19 licensing. So we have two offers currently now, a free learning license if you already have a code meter. So I think we're clear on that. And a £59 version, but it's actually shipping with express courier. So you can always track where is it in the world. Again, shipping these days is a little bit hard. So it's kind of good to have a handle where things are at some point at which place. I see that there's a question that I can jump in and answer. There is a Giancarlo asking, as a Blender user, I'm wondering if you'll offer keyboard shortcut mapping options. Yes, at this given moment, this is not an option, but it's a fairly good request. I think that's on the radar, on the scope. This was requested several times before, and it's listed in the development list. It's just a question on how far is it down the line of other priorities. But this is definitely a good request. At the moment, we do not offer a remapping of keyboard shortcuts. Maybe in the future. Not a bad shout.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we're aware of. It's just something we haven't prioritized yet, I think.
So I have an interesting one from CS Byron. I have a narrow depth of field setup and I wish to have the focal range following the front of my extruded spline reveal. So no matter where the camera is moving, the narrow focus follows the growth of the 3D stroke. Could you show an example on how to rig that?
Okay, so that would be we're looking at splines again, aren't we? Not that one, something like this.
I think we should warrant a stream about splines. It just it is rather a big subject here, isn't it?
Yeah. There's like so many rabbit holes you can get with splines, like interpolation and things like that. One day.
It's small joys that you can get out of it. Small joys.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna get some random boxes in this scene, a skylight as well. So we've got some lighting.
And while Ryan is adding the skylight, I'll just mention that we are over an hour now.
Oh,
so we're definitely going to cover a couple of more questions from the pre-made list, and then we're going to address a couple of live questions. And I think we will have to wrap up in 15 to 20 minutes. Just a heads up.
Well, yeah, that's fair enough. I'm taking too long to answer questions. I'm sorry. I only have so much. No, it's fine. I only have so much time. Right. I will add another camera, add this to the bottom so it takes priority, and that's a fun noise. And I'll set this to my current view. Oh,
Onion Danny is giving a shout to Kevin. Yes, indeed, Kevin Zeus, a live stream on YouTube, covered a load of things about splines. He's one of our power users. Definitely find him on YouTube or Vimeo, or just ping him on a Facebook user group. Kevin Zhu, he does amazing stuff. Do check it out.
Yeah, Kevin Zhu is phenomenal.
He's great.
If you haven't seen his Notchmeister content, that is nice.
Of course you haven't. Of course you haven't. It's not out yet, but it's going to be out soon.
I think he's put it on Facebook. He's posted it to YouTube, but it is nice. It is really nice. Right, let's see. So I've got that. I want depth of field. There we go. Lovely depth of field. Now I want to control the depth of field with the position of this shape 3D. So what I would do is I would add a camera focus target. So what this node does is it sets the position of the camera focus in 3D space. And then we want to link this to the position of this shape 3D. So as we've done a few times now, we take the output from the shape 3D, we connect it to the transform modifier input there. Now you should see the blur grow. There we go. Grow and shrink depending on the position of this shape. Now obviously this is just a shape. If we wanted to do it with an extruded spline, it'd be effectively the same thing, but we'd use, how much time do we have?
A little bit more. I'll allow you to go further.
I think I know that there's other questions I want to get to, so I'll hesitate from specifically connecting it together. But you're doing essentially the same thing. You take the front of that spline and you'd hook it up to the camera focus target, and then you can move things around in that way.
Cool. I'm gonna just head further then. Let's see what else we can answer. Well, Basil is asking how to resize an image added via composite source node nodes independently from the other sources. That's actually a good question about 2D compositing. So I'm going to repeat: how to resize an image added via composite sources node independently from other sources.
Okay, so I'll just set this up in a basic way. So I've got two generators, which are going to be very different. A composite sources node, which is going to, let's say, add them together, and an image 2D so we can see the output. There we go. I'll just make this a little bit more interesting with my old standard of, let's say, flow. There we go. And I'll just make this darker, because otherwise it's a bit too bright. There we go. So we want to resize these two independently. So the key thing with the composite sources node is it always takes this input, the input on the left, as the both resolution and the frame rate. So if I take this out and make this like a 1024 square, you can see that it's not appearing as a small square within this larger composition. This is being automatically resized to fit this space. If you didn't want it to do that, if you wanted to get it to fit within a space more automatically, I guess I would use a transform node. That node it allows you to resize a node before it goes, or position a node before it goes into another node. And at the moment it's set to clamp, so let's just set that to clip. There you go. So now you can have this node just within a smaller box, and if I wanted to change the position on it, I can just move it with drag handles. I could even scale it with drag handles, or even rotate it. You can see we're getting a bit of warping because it's still adapting to this image size. So maybe that's something to think about when you're doing these kinds of compositing flows. Another node to maybe think about, I don't know if it's entirely relevant here, but there's the resize node. So this node, you give it an input and it will resize that input to a higher resolution or a lower resolution depending on what you give it. So in this case, it's starting, if I just tell it to do this, it's taking a 1024 by 1024 input and it's resizing it to 1280 by 720. I can also set it to 1920 by 1080. And it's basically upsampling that image to meet that exact resolution. It's not doubling it, it's just resizing it. And so now you can see that when you add these two together, in here, is exactly in the same place. So you can almost preview where it's going to be in this node before it actually goes in. But I mean, with the fractal noise, you should probably just use reasonable resolutions before you go in. Is there another question?
Yes, the same person, Basil, is asking, is there a way to emit particles in one shot, like triggering one shots with a few particles whenever you want? So click, click, click.
So the best way to do that, I would say, is, come on. I mean, it kind of depends on the setup. If you just want a thing so that when you press a particle, like every time you click, it'll emit particles, it's probably best just to have a condition modifier here. I'm not going to hook this up entirely, I'm just going to sort of describe what you would do because I'm worried about time, as I'm sure Armin is as well. I'd hook this condition modifier to the emission rate. I'd set it to multiply. And what this means is that while this is 0, this emitter is not going to emit anything. And once a threshold has been met, when this is 1, this particle is this emission rate is going to get set to 1 and it's going to start emitting particles. So that would be one way to have it so that this particle is going to constantly just only emit when you have a button pressed. Alternatively, if you wanted to do that like just for an instant, then you could probably set this up so that it would only be 1 on change to true. And even more alternatively, if you just wanted to have an emission so that it was emitting and then it would just stop after a while, you can just set the respawn to off. And then once this emitter runs out of particles, it won't try and emit any more particles. It'll have run out of all the particles it was using. 2 a.m. here. Oh my god. I am so sorry.
Coffee time.
I hope this... Yes, coffee time indeed.
So Azaria is asking how to combine Mixamo animations inside Notch. Is that possible?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you're talking about taking a animated character and taking the animation from one character and sticking it on another one, we don't do it. Maybe there's an argument that we should figure it out.
Well, there is a workflow that might be handy though. If you have access to BVH file to the actual animation, you can grab a bone rigged FBX model, connect it with the perception neuron node or any other motion capture node, and then pipe in a BVH file to perception neuron or any other motion capture node, and then from there on you can make a switch.
Yeah,
but
so
you need to have a BVH file separate.
Yeah, essentially the same setup I used wherever it was. Thankfully, I name my layers so I can find them later.
How great of you!
Yeah, so this in this layer, this is a BVH file. This is being exported from perception neuron. But if you have like, but you don't have to use this node. If you had like an OptiTrax or setup or whatever, you could use a different node in the same mocap stream. The key thing is if you have a mocap stream of BVH data, you can apply that as well, and you can apply that to multiple meshes, not just one mesh.
Fair enough.
It depends on the setup, I suppose, and what options you have.
Okay, so Richard is asking, or Rich is asking, what is the time unit in Notch and how does it correlate with an animation speed 0 to 1 used in some nodes to describe timing? For instance, noise animation on textures.
Okay, so in general, a value of 0 to 1 means 0 to 1 second. So a continuous modifier, for example, its speed is completely linked to, let's see, I'll just add a shape 3D and connect this to heading, sure. So you can see as I reset this, every frame on the timecode, once it reaches 6, 7, 8 seconds, this is constantly matching that. In fact, if I pause it and we locked timecode, and I step back to an exact frame count, you can see that it is exactly at 4 seconds when it's at 4 seconds in, or the value is 4 when it's at 4 seconds. And that logic pretty much permeates through the entire tool. When you're talking about fractal noise, maybe, that's a bit trickier. I don't, this isn't my expertise, so I'm sort of guessing here, but I don't think there is a standardized time for what fractal noise is. Like I don't know how you'd measure 1 second in terms of fractional noise. So it might be that this is something that we've just come up with, and this is how we've decided this arbitrary amount of animation within fractal noise is 1 second. I don't know on that one, but in general, 0 to 1 is generally classed as seconds. And here, for example, if I set the speed to 30, you'll see it'll reach 30, or a multiple of 30 every second. Does that cover it? Is that all right?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. Okay, there is a question that came in live here from one of the users. Let me just double check who sent this question. That was Josh. I have a question about an image. Is there a process to sample a color from X and Y position on the image? To add more context, if I have a 3D shape, how would I color that shape by sampling a color from an image?
Okay, I will dig in here and I'll bring in one of my favorite test images, the Great Waves of Kagawa. We'll just do this. I'm much like Armin, I'm a creature of habit, so I've always got my images I like to test with. So the main thing you want to use is the video sampler node, I think. With that node, you can check for RGB values in a on a node. So for here, I think what I would do is this. Set this to the color R, and then on the shape 3D, output this to its material color. I'm going to have to do this 3 times as well. Put this here. There might be a better way to do this. I don't know. I'm sort of, as usual, I'm sort of guessing here. So
yeah, but we are improvising here because the question came in live, so obviously we'll just try out one or the other technique, and hopefully we'll nail the question.
Yeah. So this is now looking at the RGB value of probably a point right at the center here, which is probably one of these specks, so it's going to be quite white. Then I shall go in here, oops. Oh no, not that one. I'm getting myself confused. I'm not doing that there. I'm doing this here. There we go. RGB, right? Red, green, blue. Wonderful. So now if I stop looking at this and I start moving this point around, and I set this to replace this probably. How is this working? I don't remember. I need to set these down and then move these around. I got this to work at one point. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the colors are moving around now. What is happening is this is being set to add. So it was adding to the colors that were already here. So now when I move around, you can see that it's changing color. I did once set this up so there was a visual version of it, so you could move a null around an image, and then that null would control this point, and then this point would then control the color, and you can see where the rest of it goes. But that would be the setup I would use.
Yeah, I think this sums it up. Sweet. I have a question from Kyle. That's actually a very nice one as a last question. When working on multiple shows back to back or at the same time, how do you keep your inspiration fresh? Do you browse all the effects or have any outside influences that help with designing in Notch? Ryan.
I tend to use Instagram. I quite like some of the things I follow on Instagram. I've recently become a big fan of Pinterest. Just going through Pinterest and typing in just the word rendering, and then just following every single thing that I see, because some of the people on Pinterest are, some of the artists on that who get their stuff posted on Pinterest are really amazing. So just going through that, picking stuff out, and then trying to see if I can replicate it is something I quite like doing.
Yeah, that's a good shout, actually. That's a
same thing with Instagram. It's a similar thing with Instagram as well. It's just with Instagram I can see who I'm trying to copy, whereas Pinterest is a bit more I wouldn't say pirated, but it's just like random images found all over the place. So it's great as an inspiration source. I don't know. So, what about you, Armin?
Well, I'm going to focus on the other part of this question, which says, basically it states, how do you manage to be creative when you have no options to be creative, when you're depleted, when you're having shows back to back, and when you have shows at the same time. Well, that's the downtime, that's the R&D time. In a perfect world, you have a little bit of time set aside to explore new things, to stack up on ideas. Obviously, I for one really like to share whatever I do, and I give away everything from a work file to a little description, because I believe that the more you give, the more you receive. That's my mantra, and I hope there's more people who are actually doing that. In fact, there is more people doing that. So if you're not on Facebook user group, please join that place right there, Notch user group on Facebook, to grab some really nice stuff that people create. So if you use your downtime creatively, you are never in a problem when you have back-to-back work, because you spend that whole time stacking up of new approaches, new techniques, new ideas. And it just happens to be so that we are all stuck now in the R&D time, because nobody actually has, or very few of us actually has shows to go for. So I'd say if you have a node that you never tried and you want to give it a go, this is a perfect time. If there is a reference, as Ryan mentioned, that you are keen on and you would like to see this being recreated in Notch, well, go ahead. And if you cannot solve it, post it on Facebook user group. Perhaps somebody in the community will take up a challenge to recreate it or resolve it, or perhaps we will do a stream about something like that. I know Kevin, we are back to Kevin, he did something like that quite recently, and it was a great success. It was a great watch. If you haven't seen it, do check it out.
Kezu stole my idea before I even had it.
Ryan, you're very grim today. I would say that you should try to spend your time that is available to stack up for upcoming season. That's probably how majority of creative agencies work. They take a sabbatical. Is that the word?
Take a break. Sabbatical might be appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, so basically a little time to explore different approaches and different ideas. And there you go. And then you have a little pile, a little thing in the pocket to whip out and use when problems hit the fan, when you're a bit stuck.
Personally, I've been doing a bit of 3D modeling at the moment just because I love 3D modeling. I don't always get time to do it. But now I'm home all the time, so I have lots of time to do it.
I see that there are some suggestions going on in a chat. Obviously, there are some supplements that some people tend to boost themselves with. I'm going to vouch that whatever works for anyone, as long as it's a good creative output, go on, do it.
We will only judge you on the quality of your work.
I think we will have to wrap up. We are definitely.
Can I do one thing? Because there was one thing that I spent a while doing in preparation for this, and I think it's really neat. So, this is somebody asked about morphing objects together, which is something which isn't really doable, because like a 3D mesh is just a 3D mesh. So these things, the data that this mesh has no correlation to this mesh. So trying to create a blend that goes between them isn't going to work as like a deformer or something like that. You can use, and I'll just hide this for a second, you can use morphs and blend targets. So here I've got a shape which is a cube, and then I've effectively animated it, or animated this property so that you can blend between the two of them. So we've got a cube, we can blend it forward and it becomes a sphere. But the key thing with this is that the mesh is the exact same. You can see that there's no more points being created. It's just being, inflated or deflated and reinflated, right? That's just an animation that I've created and set as a blend shape on this mesh. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If, however, you want to be really annoying and you really want to blend between two things, I did come up with this thing. So here's one mesh, and I'm just going to move my wireframe. And I've set this up so that based on this math modifier, it blends into a different shape. And the way this works is I've basically keyed the distance offsets of both of these shapes, and then I'm melting between them. So if I hide the melt, you can see there is just one shape going away and another shape coming in. But when you melt it, you get a much smoother blend and grow between the two. And this, I spent a little bit of an afternoon like trying to get this look quite right, because it's a little bit of like a fudgy sort of thing, but it looks really nice when you put things together right.
So it's very clear why you wanted to show this, and thank you for
Yes.
that, Ryan. That's actually really sweet looking rig right
Yeah.
there. You are absolutely saving all of these things, correct?
Of course. Once I remember where to
Very
save them.
nice.
Very watching.
I guess that wraps it, guys. We had you for 1.5 hours.
Sorry,
I'm sure
one
that...
more thing.
Oh,
One
Ryan, you are
more-
notorious.
One
Are you
more
test? Are you
tiny-
testing how many times can I say goodbye before you
This
can?
will be the last
not
one.
stop
This will be
me?
the last one. I promise you. Because the last
fair enough.
time we did a live stream, we did a Q&A live stream. Someone asked a question that I couldn't answer, and I can answer it.
You were holding grudge on that. Haha.
So, somebody wanted to do the beat pulse modifier that counted. So I'm going to add a condition modifier. So what they wanted was every time this beat pulse, I'll just lower it a bit, every time it hit a threshold, a value would count up. And it turns out that maybe 2 weeks or so later, after that stream went out, we put out a new release. And now there's this option here, positive value delta. What this means is that it will only pay attention to the change in a positive direction. So now, if I was to add a shape 3D and we connect this to the Y position, we just reset it, you can see that every time this value gets output, this value gets a beat, it just steps up. Now we see that's fine with the beat pulse modifier, but you can do that with anything. So you could take random noise from a math modifier, and you could apply the exact same logic. Currently it's doing a sine wave, so let's do some Perlin noise, reset it. You can see that now it is randomly going up, but every time only once it gets above this property. So that's it, that's me, my hands are off the keyboard. I won't say anything else anymore. That was the one thing I wanted to get in because it annoyed me that I couldn't do it beforehand.
Well, I actually appreciate you having this OCD about not answering it then and answering it now. That's great, actually. With that said, I think we will have to wrap up. And I'm terribly sorry if there's a question that you perhaps sent in or wrote down in chat that we haven't addressed. We are simply running out of time. This is absolutely how the last stream we're doing with the Q&A. So this will be coming back once in a while, as quite a few other themes are reoccurring in our streams. So thank you for sending in the questions, and thank you for joining us live throughout all this cross-platform streaming thing. This was quite a ride. We have several chats going on and piping to one coherent setting. I think it worked. That's great. So thank you all, and see you in another stream or a tutorial.
Yep, see you later, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, Armin, while we wait to be turned off, what lighting should I do to this?
Pink.